Hello, and welcome to the public meeting presentation for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. My name is Brad Laborde. I'm the Regulatory Project Manager for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project and part of the Corps of Engineers review team in charge of developing this Environmental Impact Statement, or EIS, here at the New Orleans District. This pre-recorded presentation is available to you on the Corps of Engineers Midbarataria project webpage. Myself and the Corps review team thank you for sacrificing your time to actively participate and provide your feedback on this draft EIS. Ideally, we would host these public meetings in person, but due to the ongoing public health crisis, we cannot at this time. Again, we thank you for your participation under these circumstances. There are 3 presentations available to you. Each will cover a different aspect of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project review. The core presentation will identify engaged parties and outline our roles in this review, provide an update since the scoping period, show you how and where to submit your comments, and then I'll walk you through the draft EIS to help with your review. Brad Barth from the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, or CPRA, will present project-specific information about the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. Mel Landry from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has a presentation covering another key document the EIS will inform, the Draft Phase 2 Restoration Plan. NOAA is presenting on behalf of the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or TIG. During our live virtual meetings, the pre-recorded presentations will run in the order shown here. It is important for you to understand the roles each of us play in this process. First is the public. Your feedback is valuable to us. In 2017, we held scoping meetings and asked, what would you like to see analyzed? Now we are coming to you once again with a draft EIS to ask, how do we do, so that we can consider your comments for the final EIS. The Corps is the lead federal agency in preparing the EIS. Due to the complexity of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project review, the Corps has an independent third-party contractor with a team of subject matter experts to help analyze information and prepare the EIS. The Corps' role is strictly in a regulatory capacity. We are neither an opponent nor a proponent of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. We are tasked with making sure the EIS is based on the best available science, engineering, and professional judgment. Publishing the draft EIS is another milestone in our ongoing review. The Corps' decision to deny, approve, or proffer a least damaging alternative will not be made until after the final EIS. In addition to our independent third-party contractor, the Corps has assistance from cooperating agencies who also have teams of experts to assist with analyzing information and drafting the EIS. Many cooperating agencies also use the EIS to inform their laws and regulations. CPRA is a proponent of the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project. The project is part of their larger coastal master plan. CPRA is proposing to construct, operate, and maintain this project. The TIG is made up of a number of federal and state agencies, which includes some cooperating agencies and CPRA, that will be using the EIS as a tool to help determine whether or not to fund CPRA's proposed project. The Corps is not a TIG agency, but we work closely with the TIG and other cooperating agencies to agree to the EIS schedule and processes leading up to the publication of the draft EIS. This shows some of our key milestones, starting with the public scoping process in July 2017. During the scoping period, you gave us great feedback, submitting over 870 comments. We took your comments and asked CPRA to respond to them, which required them to use a number of scientific models and draft a series of technical reports. CPRA's modeling information and technical reports were reviewed by the Corps and our independent third-party contractor, the TIG, and our other cooperating agencies. The Corps' independent third-party contractor then drafted the EIS chapter by chapter, based in part by CPRA's modeling and technical reports, the TIG and cooperating agency comments, and other best available science. The comment period from March 5th to May 4th, 2021 is your opportunity to submit your feedback and answer the question of how did we do. Your feedback will again be considered for the final EIS. Once complete, the final EIS will have another comment period and lead to the Corps Record of Decision or Permit Decision scheduled for spring of next year. Since I've mentioned it a few times now, let's walk through the Corps Midbarataria project webpage. On the right in purple, you will find materials related to our live virtual meetings under the Draft EIS Meeting Materials title. All Corps Draft EIS public notices and links for the presentations can be found here. After our live virtual meetings, the recordings will be placed under the DEIS Meeting Recordings title. And under the Previous Meetings title, the 2017 Scoping Meeting presentation is available in case you need a refresher about the Corps' regulatory involvement or a better understanding of the EIS process. On the right in green, we have information about ways to submit your written and oral comments. I will show you the comment portal on the next slide. Below that in gold, you will see EIS documents. It is where the entire draft EIS and 2017 scoping report are stored. If you click Draft EIS, a box will open as shown in the callout. Place your cursor over the chapter you wish to review and click. Shortly after, a PDF version of that chapter will open. At the bottom here, I provided the link, but if you Google Corps Midbarataria, the top result should be this page. The second result should be another link shown here for the permitting dashboard. This example is for another project, but it gives you an idea of what to expect when you access the comment portal. It will have a project page first. If you click the Comment Now box, it will direct you to another page where you can enter your name, location, and comment in the available fields as shown here. Please notice that the comment portal is located on a National Park Service website. We are using this site because it helps us manage and sort the comments you submit for the draft EIS and restoration plan. The Corps and the TIG have full access to the material submitted here in real time, so you should have no concerns using this for your commenting. Now that I've discussed the engaged parties, updated you on our milestones, and showed you how to navigate the Corps Midbarataria project webpage, I'll turn it over to Brad Barth and Mel Landry for their presentations.
Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Brad Barth, the Mid-Basin Sediment Diversion Program Manager with the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority. Today, I'll be sharing some information specific to the Midbarataria Sediment Diversion Project. As I mentioned, I'm with CPRA, the state of Louisiana's single state agency responsible for spearheading all effort related to coastal protection and restoration. This includes developing Louisiana's Coastal Master Plan, which is a tool that helps the state prioritize funding and the implementation of coastal restoration projects across our coast. Sediment diversions are the cornerstone projects of the master plan, designed to reconnect the Mississippi River to our starved basins and reestablish the natural land building processes that originally built our delta. There are numerous factors that have contributed to Louisiana's land loss crisis. As some of you know, our state has lost over 2,000 square miles of land since the 1930s. Barataria Basin, the proposed project location, has actually experienced some of the highest rates of land loss in the world. There are several causes for our land loss, including sea level rise and subsidence, where the water level in the Gulf continues to rise as our land continues to sink, as well as other effects of climate change. Barataria Basin is also home to some of the wetlands that were most heavily oiled during the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The extensive oiling and subsequent response activities significantly accelerated land loss in this area. Other man-made contributions, like privately owned projects and oil and gas canals, have caused land loss. And probably most importantly, our current levee system, which protects our communities, has cut off the Mississippi River from depositing sediment, nutrients, and fresh water into our basins. This natural land building process, where the Mississippi River deposits sediment, sands, silts, and clays to strengthen and nourish our marshes, is how coastal Louisiana was built in the first place. As you can see here, when we built our current levee system, the red lines on the map on the right, we restricted the river from strengthening and building our marshes. A sediment diversion is designed to reconnect the river and reestablish the natural flow of sediment and nutrients out into our basins. Sediment diversions, including the Midbarataria sediment diversion, are projects the state of Louisiana has been planning and working on for decades. Plans to reconnect the river are not new, but planning for the Midbarataria sediment diversion picked up momentum in the 1980s with both state and federal agencies. By the late 2000s, significant sediment and river data collection efforts in support of sediment diversions began. This data collection continues to this day. In 2011, the Midbarataria sediment diversion was proposed at River Mile 61 to optimize the power of the river and the land building potential. In 2012, the Coastal Master Plan recommended the project as a priority. As such, CPRA embarked on the engineering, design, and permitting of the project. The 2017 Coastal Master Plan again recommended the project as a cornerstone project. Cornerstone projects are Louisiana's best tools to build and sustain land. The proposed project location is in Plaquemines Parish, on the west bank of the Mississippi River at River Mile 61, near the town of Ironton. And here you'll see a visual rendering of what the project might look like once constructed. The Mississippi River is at the bottom of your screen, flowing from right to left, and the basin is located at the top of the screen. Features include an inlet basin in the Mississippi River, a gate complex consisting of a U-frame and a gate structure, a guide levee and channel system, and an outlet basin. During high river, sediment enters the inlet basin, flows through the gate complex, guide levees and channel, and through the outlet basin, where the sediment is then slowed to begin deposition and formation of new land. The gate complex allows for control and closure of the diversion during critical times, such as a tropical storm or hurricane events. As such, the gate complex is integrated with our current levee systems. Other features include bridges for Louisiana Highway 23 and the New Orleans Gulf Coast Railroad. So, moving forward, it's important to understand all the coordinating agencies and entities involved in this process. CPRA is the agency in Louisiana responsible for planning, engineering, and design of the project. We work in close coordination with the lead federal agency, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, to provide them information as needed, where CPRA is the applicant for the Joint Section 10404 permit application. I will now turn it over to Mel Landry with the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or Louisiana TIG, who will explain the Louisiana TIG's role in this process.
Hi, I'm Mel Landry, and I'm with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, commonly referred to as NOAA. In this presentation, I'll introduce you to the Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group and our role in the Midbarataria sediment diversion. The Louisiana Trustee Implementation Group, or LATIG, is the group of coordinating federal and state agencies responsible for overseeing the use of the Deepwater Horizon Natural Resource Damages Settlement dollars allocated to Louisiana. The Louisiana TIG drafted the Restoration Plan, which is the document that details the evaluation and recommendation of the LATIG to fund the construction of the Midbarataria sediment diversion to restore resources injured by the Deepwater Horizon spill. The Deepwater Horizon spill began nearly 11 years ago, on April 20th, 2010, when the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig exploded off the coast of Louisiana and sank to the floor, a mile deep in the Gulf of Mexico, 50 miles off the coast of Louisiana. 11 workers on the rig lost their lives, and oil flowed from the seafloor for 87 days. The Barataria Basin was the epicenter of oiled wetlands. Oil worsened existing erosion and efforts to clean up the oil resulted in additional wetland damage. The agencies that are now members of the Louisiana TIG, as well as other agencies in states across the Gulf, immediately began collecting data to determine the extent of the injuries caused by the spill. Even before the full extent of the damage was known, the agencies began work to restore the ecosystem through $1 billion in early restoration funds provided by BP. 5 years ago, in 2016, the agencies reached a settlement with BP and the responsible parties that provided up to $8.8 billion in funding to restore the natural resources damaged across the Gulf of Mexico by the spill. Over half of that funding, $5 billion, is allocated to the Louisiana Restoration Area and is managed by the Louisiana TIG. Of that $5 billion, over $4 billion are allocated to restoring and conserving habitat in Louisiana. This large investment in habitat in Louisiana is in recognition not only of the large impact in the state, but also the benefit that the restoration of that habitat can provide to the Gulf of Mexico ecosystem. Our work on Deepwater Horizon restoration is guided by the Programmatic Damage Assessment and Restoration Plan, which we refer to as the PDARP. The PDARP was part of the settlement and is the overarching restoration plan that guides the development of all other subsequent restoration plans. The PDARP does not state exactly what projects should occur where, but it does guide us in the selection of the types of projects that we might plan throughout the entire Gulf of Mexico region. The PDARP recognizes the potential value of large-scale sediment diversions in restoring the resources injured by the spill. Building on the framework provided by the PDARP, in 2018, the Louisiana TIG finalized a Barataria Basin Strategic Restoration Plan that identified a combination of restoration approaches that would support restoration of the injuries in the Barataria Basin. That plan identified 3 projects for further development and evaluation: large-scale Barataria marsh creation, Spanish Pass Ridge and marsh restoration, and the Midbarataria sediment diversion. Large-scale Barataria marsh creation and Spanish Pass Ridge and marsh restoration each underwent design and evaluation in subsequent Phase 2 restoration plans and have been funded for construction. Today, we're here to present to you and hear your input on the Phase 2 Restoration Plan 3.2 for the Midbarataria sediment diversion. The objectives of the Midbarataria sediment diversion are to restore injuries from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, to deliver fresh water, sediment, and nutrients to the Barataria Basin through a large-scale sediment diversion, to reconnect and reestablish sustainable deltaic processes between the Mississippi River and the Barataria Basin, and to create, restore, and sustain wetlands and other deltaic habitats. By redirecting freshwater, sediment, and nutrients from the Mississippi into the Barataria Basin, the diversion is projected to create or sustain over 17,000 acres of marsh at its peak. Based on the sea level rise scenario used in our evaluation, the total acreage created or sustained is reduced by year 50, but is still substantial. Critically, at that point, the marshes created or sustained by the diversion represent 20% of all the marsh that is projected to remain in the Barataria Basin. The wetlands created and sustained by the diversion will restore injuries caused by the Deepwater Horizon spill by creating habitat and supporting the many resources that rely on that habitat. Some of the key benefits of the diversion are comprehensive and sustainable regional ecosystem restoration. The diversion is designed to maintain created wetlands over a long period of time without additional construction. The diversion creates and protects coastal marshes that provide habitat and reduce storm surge during large storms. The diversion is anticipated to improve the effectiveness and longevity of other marsh restoration projects, including the nearby projects that work to restore the Barataria land bridge. The diversion will provide aquatic and terrestrial species benefits, including largemouth bass, red drum, Gulf menhaden, bay anchovy, white shrimp, and blue crab. It also provide recreational use benefits, such as duck hunting, bird watching, and fishing. A key to the success of the project is being able to monitor and adapt the project based on what we learn. There is no other project like this in the world, so our analysis of the project's potential effect is based on extensive computer and large-scale physical modeling that help us understand how the river, the diversion, and the basin work. Once the diversion is operating, we can also use data from the field to maximize project benefits and reduce adverse effects while still maintaining the project's objectives. Restoring a deltaic process that has been absent at this scale in the Barataria Basin for approximately 100 years is expected to result in significant changes to the ecosystem. In addition to the benefits I've discussed, some resources will experience collateral injuries caused by the diversion. In recognition of these, the Louisiana TIG is proposing a suite of stewardship measures to help address the effects on resources and communities. One of the most visible and most impacted resources will be bottlenose dolphins. Approximately 2,000 dolphins live in the Barataria Basin. These dolphins are expected to remain in the basin as salinities decrease with diversion operation. Exposure to low salinity water and other stressors is expected to reduce the annual survival rate for dolphins across most of the basin. The Louisiana TIG and CPRA have developed a suite of measures in anticipation of impacts to dolphins and to meet the requirements of legislation that directed NOAA to issue a waiver under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. The effects on dolphins will be monitored beginning with baseline data collection before operations. To help support dolphin stocks across the state, the Louisiana TIG will fund efforts to reduce stressors as well as continued funding of the statewide marine mammal stranding network. With data from operations, CPRA will evaluate the potential to modify operations to reduce impacts to dolphins while meeting project objectives. Lastly, funding will be set aside as a contingency to support response to potential unusual mortality events, or UMEs, that could be declared based on dolphin deaths in the Barataria Basin. Some fishery resources of commercial value will also be impacted. Due to salinity changes in the basin, brown shrimp and oyster populations will be reduced and/or relocated. It's worth noting that some changes to these resources would continue to occur without the project as current trends continued in the basin, but with the projects, these effects will be accelerated. Measures to address impacts to oysters include establishment of new public seed grounds, providing culture material for public and private growing areas, enhancement of oyster broodstock reefs, and assistance with implementing off-bottom culture techniques. For shrimp, efforts include provisioning of vessel refrigeration to improve catch quality and value, and funding gear improvements to increase efficiency. For both fisheries, investments will be made in training to improve existing business or transition to new careers, and funding of marketing to improve value of catch. Through other restoration planning, the Louisiana TIG has already committed $26 million to oyster restoration, including development and operations of the oyster hatchery on Grand Isle, development of a brood reef program, and past and future placement of culture material on public seed grounds. Diverting water into the Barataria Basin will increase water levels and is expected to impact communities outside of levee systems. Subsidence and sea level rise are predicted to increase flooding in most of these areas to nearly year-round by 2027, even without the diversion. But diversion operations are anticipated to result in more frequent inundation in the near term. For example, at Grand Bayou, proposed project operations are projected to increase the number of days of flooding by 45 days per year in 2030, but by only 5 days per year in 2050 in comparison to the future without project. Because most homes outside the levee systems are elevated, it's not anticipated that operations will flood structures, but will cause more frequent inundation of roads, docks, and other infrastructure, like sewage treatment systems. To address impacts, the project includes funding to raise homes, roads, and improve community infrastructure, and to address needs on individual properties such as docks and septic systems. CPRA is also proposing voluntary easements in communities outside of levee systems to compensate owners for property impacts. CPRA is open to discussion regarding fee acquisition of property if requested by the landowner. Lastly, data from operations will be used to evaluate operational regimes that limit impacts while meeting project objectives. This is an overview of the process we've discussed today, from the beginning of our work on the PDARP through the release of this draft Phase 2 restoration plan. Based on public input, we'll release a final restoration plan that will incorporate the feedback we get from you during this public review period. In parallel with our Deepwater Horizon restoration planning process, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has led the development of a draft environmental impact statement, or EIS, as part of their permit process. You'll learn more about that in their presentation on the draft EIS. We want to hear from you. You can submit comments on the restoration plan through the web address, mailing address, or phone number listed on this slide. Unless specified otherwise, or applicable to only one document, any comments submitted will be considered in the Louisiana TIG restoration plan and the EIS, so you only need to submit your comment once. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Brad and Mel. Now that you are up to date on the project details and the draft Phase 2 restoration plan, I'll explain the draft EIS in more detail. The draft environmental impact statement for the proposed Midbarataria sediment diversion project is approximately 1,600 pages. It is a very large document with material that can get technical at times. Some of you may read the draft EIS from cover to cover, but most of you will have interest in only a couple areas of the document. By going through what is available to you in each chapter of the draft EIS, I hope to make finding what you wish to review a little bit easier. First is the table of contents. Use it as your guide to the draft EIS. Each chapter is broken into sections and then more specific subsections like the example for Chapter 3 shown here. Notice that the page numbers begin with the chapter, 3 in this case, then the page number where the topic begins. The table of contents also includes the page numbers to all of the tables and figures in the draft EIS. It also includes the list of appendices. Next is the executive summary. The executive summary describes the proposed action, lists the purpose and need along with the alternatives analyzed in the draft EIS, and summarizes the potential environmental impacts. The executive summary is intended to be a non-technical and condensed version of the draft EIS. If you plan to comment or have an interest in the proposed project, you may want to begin your review with this section of the draft EIS. Reading it may give you all the information you need, or it can help you flag chapters and sections of the draft EIS you may want to review in more detail. Chapter 1 establishes the draft EIS purpose and need. The purpose and need statement is considered to be a foundational piece of the document because it helps determine which alternatives will be carried forward in the EIS analysis. As we have discussed, this draft EIS serves many different agencies, but for the Corps, the meat of the purpose and need statement is underlined for you here. You can also reference Chapter 1 for project background and history, a summary of previous studies, a list of Corps of Engineers civil works projects within the proposed Midbarataria sediment diversion project area, EIS scope and relevant issues, and a list of agency roles and responsibilities. Chapter 2 is where you will find information about the alternatives evaluated in the draft EIS. It explains how the Corps, in coordination with the TIG and cooperating agencies, developed a screening criteria to evaluate a wide range of alternatives, including coastal restoration methods, project locations, flow capacity, and operational triggers, to arrive at the range of alternatives shown here. The draft EIS carries forward 6 alternatives and the no action alternative for further analysis. The 6 alternatives are all sediment diversions at variable maximum flow rates. A variable flow up to 75,000 cubic feet per second, which is CPRA's or the applicant's preferred alternative. A variable flow of up to 50,000 cubic feet per second, and a variable flow of up to 150,000 cubic feet per second. Marsh terracing in the outfall area was an alternative considered for each flow capacity. I included a marsh terracing example over to the side for you, but in general, they are designed to be little sediment catchers. Chapter 2 also includes a comparative summary of all the potential impacts for each alternative. If you are a casual reviewer, after the executive summary, this table, Table 2.9-1, will help you understand the construction and operational impact determinations for each alternative listed here. The Affected Environment chapter gives a description of the existing conditions and trends in the project area, which may be affected by each alternative. It establishes a baseline that we can then use to evaluate impacts in Chapter 4, the Environmental Consequences chapter. Chapters 3 and 4 are broken down into 22 distinct resource areas as listed here. The Environmental Consequences chapter is perhaps the most important chapter of the draft EIS because it explains the potential positive and negative impacts for each sediment diversion alternative in comparison to the trends and conditions from Chapter 3. Chapter 4 is where you would go if you want a more technical explanation of the proposed project's direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts during construction and operation. In the draft EIS, construction impacts are considered over a 5-year time frame. The operational impacts spanned over a 50-year projection. Impacts are assessed for both context and intensity. Context helps you understand the duration of an impact and uses terms like temporary, short-term, long-term, and permanent. Intensity helps you understand the severity of an impact and uses terms like no impact and negligible, minor, moderate, or major impacts. For each resource, the context and intensity is defined, followed by the analysis of each alternative in comparison to the no action. Each section ends with the impact determination. In addition to impacts, Chapter 4 includes a mitigation summary outlining CPRA's proposed avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures. By now, you've heard a lot about the Corps permit decision and the TIG funding decision, but there are a number of other laws and policies the draft EIS will inform. Some examples include the Endangered Species Act, Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act, and the National Historic Preservation Act. Chapter 5 summarizes the means of compliance with all statutes, orders, and policies. Chapter 6 lists the names and qualifications of the individuals primarily responsible for writing the draft EIS. Chapter 7 discusses the past, ongoing, and future public involvement opportunities associated with this review. Also, the draft EIS is littered with acronyms. Chapter 8 has a list of all of them in alphabetical order for your reference. And Chapter 9 is the index, which gives page numbers where keywords and topics can be found throughout the draft EIS. I like to think of Chapter 10 and the appendices as our way of showing our work. Chapter 10 gives a reference list of all the best available science and literature used to help with the analysis and drafting of the EIS. The appendices are approximately 6,000 pages of 20 technical reports, studies, and analysis that was considered when drafting the EIS. The modeling and technical reports that I mentioned earlier by CPRA can be found in this part of the document. Before I wrap up, I want to remind you that the draft EIS for the proposed Midbarataria Sediment Diversion project is a large document that can be technical. It is available for the casual reviewer with the executive summary, comparative summary of alternatives table, and the table of contents to help you find areas in the draft EIS of your interest. From there, it ranges in complexity as you read through the draft EIS chapters, ending with Chapter 10 and the appendices for those who really want to dig deep into the analysis. In conclusion, I want to thank you for your participation and remind you that your comments play an important role in our process. So please send us your feedback by May 4th, 2021 by either the comment portal we discussed earlier, by traditional mail to the Corps of Engineers, and if you prefer to provide oral comments, please leave a message at 866-211-9205. Thank you.